Shall I begin?
Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Ian Flood. I'm a programmer at Yacht Games and a creator of Shovel Knight. We are recently working on Shovel Knight King of Cards, and we've released Shovel Knight Spectre of Torment, Shovel Knight Plague of Shadows, and the original Shovel Knight.
Following the success of the Kickstarter campaign, did you guys expect Shovel Knight to take off the way it did, to be pretty much released for every platform?
We definitely wanted to be on every platform. We knew that ahead of time, but we did not expect to have the kind of just the goodwill and pickup that it has since launch. We are expecting this to be our initial project as a new company, and we're willing to accept, maybe hopefully enough people enjoy it that we can make the next game, we can continue on to the next thing. But just the amount of support from the Kickstarter midway through and post-release has been astounding. I really can't believe it. And so we've been doing our best to take that energy and to put it back into the game by making the campaigns that much bigger, by making the new additions that much more unexpected.
Not to mention making it available, day one with Nintendo Switch.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I was very fortunate that we could be a part of the Switch launch like that. I think a lot of people said that they were playing Breath of the Wild for hours on end, and then they used Spectre of Torment as a palate cleanser, something a little bit more two-axis based and a little bit more straightforward. So that was cool to see. Oh, that's a good question. I mean, we're working on King Knight's campaign, which is the finale, the final campaign in Shovel Knight, and right now we're looking at the later end of this year.
Okay.
That's our current plan for King of Cards, and so it's tough because every time we release a new update or work on a new campaign, we take everything back into the workshop and completely retool it. The character mobility, the story, it's we're going to focus on a different story thread, we're going to focus on a different character, and he's going to play completely differently. And more recently with Spectre Knight and now King Knight, we're making all new levels or all new types of levels. And so there's a lot of development and iteration time to make the new character style work right, beyond just pixeling the animations or putting in all the attacks.
What are the...
I was just going to say, along with that, you guys also have a card game that's going to come with King of Cards, too. And there's probably a lot of challenge in making that work, too.
Yeah, as part of our stubbornness to always double down and try to put in more things than anyone expects. That's right, King of Cards gets its name as, in addition to platforming, there's also a fully featured original card game involved. And so this is a collectible card game. You get more cards into your deck, and it's more played it's on a limited grid, and you push cards around to try and capture gems from the opponent. And so a big part of that, not just getting the rules all set up, it's also setting up the extra utilities and functions so it's playable. It's also figuring out where it fits in the game. A big inspiration for us was Triple Triad in Final Fantasy VIII, which was a fully integrated card game. And there are some important lessons in there, right? It's Triple Triad, they don't ask you to play a card game in the middle of a dungeon. And for us, similarly, we don't want to bring up cards in the middle of a level. It's a big switch to go from jumping on platforms in a very specific time to thinking about what's the most optimal deck to beat somebody else's card game strategy. And so making sure that it's integrated but also has space to breathe has been a big focus for us.
You mentioned with, every time you release Plague Knight, Spectre Knight, King Cards, you go back to the gameplay style, try to make it better. What are some of the new features, new additions, things that you're doing with the King of Cards DLC drop that makes it better than the ones that came before?
Well, a lot of times, sometimes we just focus on different play styles by itself. It's Shovel Knight it was a straightforward character. Plague Knight was a very technical character. Spectre Knight, we wanted to kind of reel back and make him more immediately accessible. So he's not as likely to fall down pits because he can climb up walls, or he can slash through enemies to stay afloat. And with King Knight, there's a little bit of that. He's a little bit of a hybrid. He can bash into walls and spin to save himself. And there's just we keep learning more about what a player is thinking when they're going through the game. And I think one of the biggest things we took away from Shovel Knight is that some players get really stressed out at a pit or at spikes and things like that. And we don't want to pull away that challenge, but we do want to provide more options for a player that feels anxious about playing a platformer for the first time. Whether that's an armor upgrade or a specific weapon, so that they can overcome these obstacles and get to more of the game and have fun just like everyone else is playing the game.
Can you tell me what the inspiration was for these games?
Sure, yeah. I think for Yacht Club Games, we originally met all at our previous company. We were all making games in different configurations at a company company called Way Forward Technologies, and they make video games too. And we work together in different configurations, as I said. And one thing we would do after work is we'd all gather around and play classic games like Mega Man, or Marchio is we played through all the Mario games in March. Mega Man, we played through all the games in May, which we just are wrapping up back at the office this month. And so we bonded and grown just playing these games and sharing what we liked about them and like all the cool parts of it. Everyone had a different favorite in the series. Everyone loved different elements of it, and we saw that we had a lot of common design aspirations based on it. And so when we made Shovel Knight, we wanted to take those ideas and also from a lot of other games that inspired us at the time and put them together in a new compelling package, as well as like our own spin on things or how we do things a little bit differently, or maybe parts that we didn't particularly like in those games. And our hope was to bring in more people. Our hope is to bring in people that maybe never played these games before. And I mean, one of the greatest compliments we get is somebody says, "Hey, I played through Shovel Knight, and when I was done, I played Mega Man for the first time, or Castlevania, or Ninja Gaiden." And so it's cool to know that maybe Shovel Knight could be that bridge over into that section of games, since we love them so much.
Also, it seems like Shovel Knight's a precursor for all these 8-bit inspired games we're seeing. We're seeing stuff like Celeste, Bloodstained, Curse of the Moon. I mean, how does it feel to be just like at the forefront of these retro-inspired games?
I mean, I guess if we're bringing more attention to this style of gameplay, I'm very happy for that. I think it's great to see. I'm excited just to play these games, and so it's cool to see more developers take a stab at it. And I think for us, even when we announced Shovel Knight, I think we are aware of a lot of other 8-bit or 16-bit inspired games at the time. Mega Man 9, of course, was a huge inspiration for us with what NT Creates and Capcom put together with bringing the whole series back and focusing on, they took out the charge, they took out the slide, they focused on the most identifiable, immediately fun parts of Mega Man. It was amazing, and so that was what we wanted to take part in or be a part of. But yeah, it's cool to know that other developers have seen that. I mean, for us, another reason why we wanted to do the 8-bit art style is that we wanted to make a game entirely in our own team. We knew, we've worked on 16-bit games before, we worked on hand-drawn games before, and all of that involves a lot of outsourcing, or it involves a lot of drafts sent out and come in for pixel art, for characters, for backgrounds. It can take a long time to get that visual aesthetic completely locked down. But we wanted to do everything in-house because we knew that a game is about changes. You have to change the tile set when it doesn't read. You have to change the attack when it doesn't reach how you want it to, or it's not as fast as you want. And we wanted to be able to iterate on that very quickly, all in-house. And so the 8-bit art style really allowed us to tap into that, really make changes. I think one of the biggest things I remember is the Spectre Knight boss in the original Shovel Knight. He's a giant floating Grim Reaper type boss, and he has a large scythe, a pretty large scythe, even today. But during the first revision of that boss, the scythe was a little too large. It was extended down, the blade was a lot larger, and so that's pretty much core to every bit of his animation. How he throws it, how he attacks, how he carries it. And after playing the boss a few times with a bunch of new players, everyone kept getting caught up on it in ways that we didn't want to or didn't expect. And so our pixel animator looked at the info and the feedback, and he's like, "We're gonna have to redraw that scythe." I guess that's it. There's no other answer. We just have to redraw it. And so he sat down and redrew. I think it's maybe 200 frames or something like that, and just took it down a few notches. If this was a more elaborate character, or if this was done out of house, that would mean a complete redo on the animation, sending it out, getting it back. And so having that immediacy really helped.
So with Yacht Club and Shovel Knight, such a smashing success. You guys are used so often to represent success of what any game studio could be. I want to ask you a fun question. With all that success, what's a cool thing that you or the studio have got to do? What's been a highlight moment since Shovel Knight's release?
Being here is already tremendous. The fact that I can come out to Momocon and take part in all the excitement, go on the show floor and buy a few games to bring back home. That's already pretty exciting. That's something that I normally wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to do. Likewise, being able to meet with fans and being able to just looking at our support inbox is way more positives than crash errors with the game. People coming to us and saying "Hey, your game is it was very exciting." A father said he played through the game with his son, and the Enchantress was the first boss that he ever beat in a video game, and they played through it together, and that was very heartwarming to see. somebody's it's like, Spectre Knight got me through like a kind of a rough spot in my life because I was like playing that on the side, and it was like something fun to kind of escape away from that. And so just being able to participate and see people's directs, I don't know, to see the joy that it's bringing people, to see just the inspiration that it brings other people making games themselves. That's all been like very terrific.
That's
Sorry.
Can you expand a little bit more on the concept art for Shovel Knight and how the process of making it?
Oh, sure. Yeah. For us, it can go different ways for us, just because sometimes we start something at the pure concept phase where it's like, hey, we need, Shovel Knight visits a village and we need a lot of different characters that he can interact with. And some of these could be one-off, some of these could be, an object, like, a gameplay object or something like that. And so that usually starts at the pure concept phase. Our concept artist goes through and things like, it's like, here's a character and like what's like a few notes about them. It's like maybe they're really mopey, or maybe they're like always frantic, or maybe they're like a little dopey, like that kind of thing. And once we have all the concepts laid out, we kind of like highlight the ones that we want to go forward with. Then they get turned into pixel art, and then they go into the programmer to put them in the game and bring them to life. Sometimes for like a gameplay element that appears mid-level, it comes from a functional point, right? It's like, hey, we need an enemy that like you can stand on. When you stand on them, they go faster. And those are usually a little bit more complicated because they come with so many design constraints. It's like, hey, since you can jump on this enemy, he needs like a solid platform that looks like you can stand on it. And so and also he needs to fly over anything, and also it shouldn't look like he's like interacting with anything. And so the end of that is like a bird with a hat, or something that the concept artist like has to really take a lot of like gameplay considerations into place. For the original Order of No Quarter, the big iconic boss knights, those kind of came from rather than starting at different characters, we thought about locations we'd like to see Shovel Knight visit. It's like, so we wanted to visit, an icy mountain peak, a volcano by a lost city, and like a laboratory. And so from that, the concept artist drew on what kind of character would inhabit that place, and how they would be a knight, or how they would like represent themselves as a character. And so I think it's been kind of fun because when making a video game, the starting point for these inspirations for these characters can come from all different locations, but they always go through every point of speciality to make sure that it's shining its brightest, whether that's pixel art, concept art, implementation.
Would you say going with an 8-bit style is an easier way for development, or is there different?
I wouldn't say necessarily easier. There's different. It all depends on like what your team is capable of, what skills they've already built up, and what what kind of things the game needs to do. An 8-bit art style for us would be limited if we needed to, for instance, put hats on a character. If we wanted to have equipable armor on Shovel Knight, where all of his parts change out, we'd be very limited in terms of how we could do that, whether with palettes or like slight overlays. But if you had a game that was all about customization, then you would probably need to look into 2D or paper doll style animation or something like that. So I think it's just one tool that is possible for the job.
Now, we rarely get to know the developers behind the games that we love to do. Can you tell us about yourself? What made you want to become a game developer?
Let's see. I mean, when I was growing up with my friends in New Jersey, video games felt much smaller back then. I remember I was excited whenever I saw video games on TV, like even for a moment. It's like, oh, the Mario Brothers movie, it's got a commercial, I can't believe it, or something like that. And so our group of friends, we would kind of we played like MMOs together, we played console games, we played like all the biggest releases. And I think at a certain point in high school, we all started becoming more interested in programming. And so rather than just playing some of these games, we were also making levels. I remember making like Load Runner stages. I remember making like Zelda-like stages and like a Zelda-like game, and just like putting it around, trying to make a dungeon, trying to make it work. And some of my friends like were modding Quake or Quake 3. And so it was amazing seeing like just making small edits and seeing it come to life from a gameplay standpoint, even if that's just like making a door script work so it opens when you touch it. That was all very exciting. And so past high school, I figured I enjoyed programming and I enjoyed playing games, and I thought I'd keep that separate. I'd like be just as happy making software or something like that. But I decided I'd go all in and just learn more about the video game side of it. And after graduating, I ended up going to Way Forward Technologies, and that's where I met the Yacht Club Games crew. And so I'm doing it.
Would you say, how do you think that video games are harmful?
I guess I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer that. I'm sorry. I feel like I don't have the viewpoint to answer that in an articulate way. I'm sorry.
Well, rather than, let's say, if somebody who's not into video games and doesn't really understand the draw of them, how would you explain that to them?
Oh, well, I would say video games are a compelling, interactive way to think about the world differently, or to think about elements in like a fictional space in a way that, the same way like reading a book lets you think about the characters and the interactions that are happening, or a movie lets you like getting completely immersed in just where its plot and its characters. A video game does the same, just with different video game components, whether that's thinking about like how an object interacts when I jump on it, or what an opponent is doing in like a very like intense one-on-one kind of game. I would hope that if somebody wasn't interested in video games currently, that more people make more types of games for more people, and we see more people being involved in it just because they find a game that's more relevant to them or speaks to them, whether that's characters, gameplay mechanics, or like 3D space.
Was there anything that you guys ran across the development of Shovel Knight that had to be left on the cutting room floor that you wish had made it into the game, or would you say everything that you guys planned we're going to see, like either already in the game or coming up in King of Cards?
I feel like, especially now with King of Cards, we kind of got everything in. It's been a few years on, and so I wouldn't say there's anything that we had like it's like all sprited up, all in game, and like we just got to cut it because it's too weird. But we have a lot of, I guess, running jokes, or a lot of things that we said would always be in the game and we've always got in there. And so I feel like with King of Cards we've like fully reached it. But other than that, I don't think we have too many. There aren't too many whole concepts. We try to keep pretty focused on Shovel Knight.
My question.
Before I end
So can you just reiterate what your role is on the topic?
Oh, no problem. Yeah, primarily I'm a programmer at Yacht Club Games, and so I code like player mobility, bosses, menus, everything that needs doing. We have, since we're a small company of only like a dozen people or so, I also run like our Twitter feed. I also run like support emails and things like that. In addition to being involved on the design elements and all that, we have a pretty collaborative workflow in terms of new ideas, and so everyone's involved in like creating new mechanics or creating new characters. But primarily, yes, I'm a programmer.
Feeding on that, what would you say is probably the toughest challenge when it comes to creating a good boss design for a game such as this?
I guess a big challenge is, I guess, like the spectacle. You want a boss that feels like you can compete on equal terms, where you're not just dodging like one-hit kills or anything like too esoteric. But you do want the player coming away feeling like, whoa, like that boss, I don't know, he was like really tough. And so a lot of times that involves shaking up the environment, but in a way that maybe feels scary but is safe. It's like, the ground breaks out and then new ships, Propeller Knight comes in. We found that that's more effective in Spectre of Torment than it was in Shovel Knight, where the ground broke out and if you fell in, you instantly died. And so a lot of times the challenge comes in from, the challenge is creating challenge without it being all that much challenge.
Without being Dark Souls.
Yes, yeah.
I guess I just one more question from me. We were promised a Commodore 64 version.
That's right. Yeah, that's being worked on. That trailer was running on real code, running on Commodore 64. That the developer Carl Henrik, who's been working on it on the side, he brought in his hardware. He's run on it a few times, and he's been making small incremental tweaks to it. That's a real thing that's happening. But he's also working on an additional Commodore 64 original project, and so I think that's taking up most of his time on it.
How twisted is it to see something like Shovel Knight on like old hardware like that it was never really intended for?
I think it's cool. I think it's fun to see the character and world sort of transformed by the limitations. It's like, we said Shovel Knight would be a rose-tinted look at 8-bit platforming games, and so that meant that we didn't have to be beholden to any of the limitations, just like aesthetic ones or maybe ones that felt more gameplay in line. So to see it make the jump to a system that's more constrained naturally, and to see what what needs to change, what it means to have a bigger character on screen or to use the limited color palette is kind of fun.
I guess I can ask one final one. Once you guys get finished up with Shovel Knight, are you looking forward to getting some rest, or are you guys lining up something? I know you probably can't tell us what it is.
I think after King of Cards and the battle mode launches this year, I think we're looking to never take a rest, but we are looking probably to do something outside of Shovel Knight for a bit. Like trying out a new genre and a new world would probably be most interesting for us. Although maybe it could still be in the SK universe or the Twist or something like that too.
Kart racing. There you go.
Yeah,
Thanks. I was going to follow up. It's a really good question. For the future, your next project, should we expect a different art style?
I think it would be possible. I don't think we're beholden to any particular aesthetic. It all depends on, what we think would be the most fun, what we think we could accomplish, and what would carry the gameplay the biggest way. We always, people ask us a lot. It's like, well, now that Shovel Knight NES style has happened, whereas Shovel Knight 16-bit or 32-bit, and for a lot of that, we think we wouldn't want to just make that jump for the sake of it. That technological leap, even just in style limitation, we'd want that to come with a big gameplay payoff as well. It's like when I think about a Super Nintendo style game, I think about Mode 7 rotations or layer tricks and a little bit more characters that scale in and out. And so I would want to make sure that game, if it existed, would take full advantage of that in a way that doesn't feel gimmicky like some of those games did in that way.
Thank you.